Hi everyone. So welcome to another one of the cluster updates. So we've had updates from the Scottish and the Welsh clusters. Now it's the time for England, and we're going to start in the northeast. So we've got a talk today from Mark Lewis from the Tees Valley Combined Authority and Bilal Ahmad from BP. They're going to tell us about what's been going on in Teesside. So I'll just do a quick introduction to Mark and to Bilal, and then I'll hand over to Mark. So Mark started working at Teeside in 1978 with ICI. He joined the process industry cluster in 2006. And since 2015, he's been working in the Tees Valley Combined Authority, developing the region as a leading industrial carbon capture and storage cluster for the UK. His focus now is working to show how the region, with its industrial cluster, can lead to achieving the UK's decarbonisation goals. So Mark also now works on hydrogen transport projects, including road and rail deployment. And he also works on the net zero Teeside project, we'll be hearing a lot about today, an industrial CCS system aiming to secure Teeside's industrial economy in a low carbon world. And we also have Bilal Ahmad from BP. So quick intro to Bilal. He's a business development analyst in the hydrogen and CCUS team at BP, working on developing the Northern Endurance Partnership and the Net Zero Teeside. His prior background in the front-end concept development for BP projects in Africa and project management and engineering of subsea infrastructure for offshore gas projects in the Caspian. Okay, so I'll hand over to Mark now for the first part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. I'll share my screen. See if I can find it. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Yes, you've had my introduction. So I've been in and around carbon capture and storage and more latterly hydrogen for quite some time now, as we were just talking about before this meeting. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the Tees Valley, and you'll get a lowdown on what's happening in terms of the carbon capture and storage initiatives in the valley from Bilal. What all this is about the Tees Valley looking to achieve net zero as an industrial cluster by 2040, and really using that approach and process to ensure that we have got a sustainable regional economy, both sustainable from the point of view of economic activity, but also from the point of view of the environment, of course. And ideally with it underpinning growth in the Tees Valley, where we've seen, as you will see in a moment, some considerable changes in employment and industrial activity over the last few years. But we become, I think, increasingly optimistic as things move forward, particularly in the carbon capture space. What we are as an industrial cluster is a very compact cluster. I think probably one of the more compact clusters in the UK, with an awful lot of energy intensive and related activities in one small area of the UK, coupled with a port. I mean, it's all centered around the Tees itself, which is one of the UK's larger ports, really, with a lot of traffic in chemicals, but also increasingly in other goods and services. When we bring some cars in, we bring in a lot of container traffic, and we have big warehousing operations in the Tees Valley itself. And of course, the presence of the port allows import of things like biomass into the new biomass power plant that's just been starting up in the Tees Valley, which is it's the largest sort of purpose-built biomass plant in the UK. There and other developments around mineral processing. We're starting to see that. We've got, well, 2 mines now in the region, both of which are going to use the Tees port as an export terminal for them. Both of them mining something called polyhalite from under the North York Moors and under the sea, under the North Sea, for agricultural purposes. So a compact cluster. What we've then got beyond that is is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, in development site, industrial development site in the UK, which is the site of the former Steelworks, which you can see there in all its glory. Obviously, this has been at the heart of our original plans on carbon capture and storage as the anchor emitter. But circumstances dictated otherwise, and we've reduced our carbon emissions substantially, but also had a big hit on our regional economy. And it's getting recovering from that, and if you like, using this asset as a basis for growth that's really behind a lot of what the combined authority is trying to do. And we see lots of plans, some of which are coming to fruition. I mean, you can see the kind of direction we're going in by looking at the wind farm up on the top left there. Well, admittedly, that's a small one and just offshore, but that gives you, if you like, a insight into what we're trying to do. And on this Steelworks site, which is now called Teesworks, if you've heard of it, which encompasses the Steelworks site, other areas of land, and if you like, surrounds the Teesport area. We're seeing scope for an awful lot of industrial development, and part of that will be the site for the net zero Teesside project that Bilal will talk about after my presentation. But I mean, we still see on there steel processing, actually, although the blast furnace has gone. At the bottom of the picture there, we have the rolling mills at Lackenby, which are still in operation, owned by British Steel. So, you know, the site is we're still involved in Teesside in steel making, which is part of the long tradition of the area, and one that we want to see carried on in a new direction with no carbon production. And particularly on that side, I'll just mention here and leave this to Bilal. Of course, we've got the net zero Teesside activity, which is a carbon capture and storage network coupled with a power plant, and obviously the network coupled into the industrial sites that I showed earlier on around the Teesside. But I'll leave Bilal at the end of my presentation to talk in much more detail about what that is and what the Northern Endurance Partnership is, which is another development that we're party to in the UK. But what we're also trying to push is the hydrogen economy in the Tees Valley. The combined authority is doing that, and we've recently been awarded the status of the first hydrogen transport hub in the UK, to look at transport applications of all kinds, really, ranging from cars, as you can see there, to heavy lift forklifts, lighter forklifts, and even into things like aeroplanes, where the fact that the combined authority owns the airport in the Tees Valley is perhaps helps us look at how we might employ hydrogen as a decarbonisation fuel in that sector, even if initially it's going to be on the ground. But there are hydrogen aircraft being developed, as I now understand, that we would hope would land on Teesside and be refueled there. I'll move on from that. So I think we see hydrogen as a real option in the Tees Valley. I mentioned transport, and rail transport is another area that we're interested in developing. Again, with a port, there are clearly marine applications possible, as well as ones around freight transport and such like. Clearly also hydrogen into industrial processes as a heat source or as an intermediate is important. I mean, our carbon capture projects here in the Tees Valley have always included decarbonising hydrogen as a chemical intermediate, and clearly getting a net transport and storage network here would allow production of hydrogen, blue hydrogen, at scale. And in fact, opposite to that, BP have announced recently that they're looking to build a 1 gigawatt hydrogen plant in the Tees Valley to take advantage of the carbon capture and storage network. And clearly, hydrogen also is a good source of energy storage, if you like, to help even out intermittent renewables, which we'll come on to in a minute. And the Tees Valley has a cavity storage, underground cavity storage, which is already in place for hydrogen in the region. So we've got that hydrogen network and grid in place at the moment to allow development of the hydrogen economy to proceed. The bottom point there about large-scale renewables and impact on hydrogen is particularly apposite, because we're seeing significant growth in wind energy in the North Sea, and projects are going to land onshore literally adjacent to the Steelworks there, adjacent to the chemical complex just to south of it. And we're expecting to see the first of those projects in operation in 2023, which isn't very far away. And the turbines themselves are going to be the world's largest. At least they are at the moment. Let's hope, you know, they will no doubt be bigger ones ultimately, but they're certainly of significant scale. And in that regard, the Teesworks development, the old Steelworks site, is providing the facility for us to attract inward investment in the shape of GE wind turbines, who are going to be assembling wind turbines, manufacturing blades for them in the Tees Valley on the old Steelworks site. And we're at the moment constructing a heavy lift quay, which I think is something like a kilometre long or whatever, to actually house all of that assembly that you can see there on the diagram, plus all the assembly factories that are going in place, which as usually in these things are sized at multiples of football fields. I think 3, or is it 5? I'm not sure. Anyway, they are going to be very large, and we are very optimistic that this is the start of a low carbon or net zero Teesside industrial cluster. You can see in the middle of the picture there, below all the wind turbine buildings, and next and to the left of the blades is the biomass power plant, which is 300 megawatts of biomass power. So we're seeing that happening in the region too. And what we see ultimately is vision of high T's, I like to call it, a net zero hydrogen valley, where hydrogen and CCS and wind power all come together to provide a low carbon economy, to provide an energy vector that's flexible, that allows you to use renewables effectively, overcome their intermittency, but also supports continued industrial production, if you like, decarbonizes the chemicals and raw materials that we're going to need to actually move towards net zero over the next 20 or 30 years. Anyway, that's just a brief update on what's going on in the Tees Valley. Obviously, welcome to answer any questions, but I will now hand over to Bilal from Net Zero Teesside and BP to talk about what that project is currently up to.
Great stuff. Thanks, Mark. I'll just share my screen to get us going. Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone. Really good to be here. For those folks who might have filtered in a little bit late, my name is Bilal Ahmad. I'm in the business development team at BP, working on CCUS and hydrogen, pretty much focused entirely at the moment on the development of Net Zero Teesside and the Northern Endurance Partnership. So what I was planning on talking you through over the next few slides was basically an introduction and an overview of what the Northern Endurance Partnership is and how it fits into what we are doing on Teesside and also the Humber. So really, just to get started, the Northern Endurance Partnership is really a sort of a joint value proposition to form a single East Coast cluster between Teesside and the Humber, and offer an onshore and offshore CO2 transportation and storage system to industrial emitters and low carbon projects in both regional locations. We have a partnership which is being developed by BP as the operator, closely supported by National Grid. So National Grid are operating the onshore system on the Humber, and the other project partners we have are Equinor, Shell, Total, and Eni. So between us, we feel we have pretty much unrivaled experience in the development of onshore and offshore infrastructure, dealing with gas, and also experience and expertise in pilot CCUS projects which have happened around the globe to date. We are also offering the access directly to the Endurance saline aquifer in the southern North Sea, which many of you on this call will be familiar with. It is the UK's largest most well appraised saline aquifer for carbon storage. And the beauty of the location in the southern North Sea adjacent to Endurance is the bunter closure formations, which effectively offer the ability to rapidly scale up storage beyond the Endurance aquifer as we expand the CO2 capture projects in both locations, and we have increasing amounts of CO2 coming into the system. So we believe we've got a really good understanding of how we move from Endurance to other adjacent stores in the southern North Sea. So this is a bit of a diagram just showing conceptually how this works between the two locations. So we've got Teesside and Net Zero Teesside on the left-hand side. There is a 145 kilometer offshore pipeline, which runs all the way across to Endurance. And then from the Humber region, we have an 85 kilometer pipeline coming into Endurance. So both of those pipelines will operate in dense phase. And at Endurance, we will have subsea infrastructure. So we'll have subsea injection manifolds and Christmas trees, and then effectively wells drilled about 1.5 kilometers into the seabed down into the Endurance structure. The locations adjacent to Endurance conceptually show the bunter closures, which we would expand to once Endurance starts to reach its capacity for CO2, and so we believe there is a compelling case to build out infrastructure along the seabed to other stores adjacent to the Endurance area. And right now we've actually got vessels out in the southern North Sea carrying out survey work to further appraise and understand both the geology and geotechnical parameters around the Endurance area as we get ready to take this project into the feed stage, hopefully a little bit later on this year. So a lot of really important survey work going on, sort of demonstrates how real this project is becoming for all of us, really. The couple of other things, I guess, to point out on this, both of these clusters have a significant decarbonisation potential. So between the two clusters, we believe we can decarbonise up to 50% of the UK's industrial emissions, which is not an insignificant number, and I'll come on to talk a little bit more about that shortly. Just stepping into the commercial world for a second, and one of the questions that people often have is, how is this going to work from a commercial perspective? How is this going to work from a business model perspective? So this slide is kind of a bit of a simplified overview of the commercial structure that will underpin these projects. So starting on the right-hand side, we obviously have all of the infrastructure required to transport the CO2, whether that's onshore pipelines, onshore compression, and then also subsequently the offshore pipelines and the offshore and subsea injection system. All of that will sit in a transportation and storage company, TNS company, which is what the Northern Endurance Partnership is for both locations. And it will operate under the transport and storage regulated investment model, the TRI model. So fundamentally, that JV or that company will make its money from receiving a TNS fee, which will be charged to emitters connecting into the system. And as several folks on this call will be aware, the government is working to develop the business models underpinning, develop the TRI business model. There was a significant update published by BEIS in December, followed by an update which was published just last month in May. And I'll talk a little bit more towards the end of the presentation about how we expect to get from the sort of initial business models that have been published at this stage to the final business models, which will allow us to take the final investment decision to move this project on. We have then at the top right-hand side, the Teesside cluster, or the Teesside location, where we will have industrial emitters, building capture facilities. We will have hydrogen projects. All of those will operate under hydrogen business models, which are sort of yet to be published imminently in the next month or two, and also the ICC, the industrial carbon capture model, where they will receive capex and revenue support from government. So capex support to finance the construction of capture plants, and revenue support to help pay, at least in the initial years, whilst the carbon price is catching up, the transportation and storage fee to the TNS company. On the bottom left-hand side, it's the same concept for the Humber cluster. The Bays have set out a few different views on how they expect the TNS fee might look and evolve. So we are working with them to understand what the component parts of the transportation and storage fee will be. But effectively, the TNS system will be a regulated asset-based system. So not too dissimilar to, conceptually not too dissimilar to how existing regulated businesses work in the UK, under the likes of Ofgem, for example. We then also have on Teesside the NZT power project, which is going to be a gas-fired CC, combined cycle gas turbine, and with post-combustion capture of CO2. So that will operate under something called the DPA, the Dispatchable Power Agreement, again to be agreed with Bays, and that will make its revenue from the electricity price that will be when it's dispatching electricity into the grid. And again, that emitter, effectively it is an emitter, will be paying a TNS fee to the NEP TNS company when it's up and running and capturing CO2 and putting it into the system. The I think quite a few folks will be familiar with the story, but just a quick recap on why power, sort of gas with CCS is an important part of the power generation mix for the UK. As you'll all be aware, we have, we've had a really great story with the development of offshore wind in the UK, and its sort of forecast development will make it an increasing and quite a dominant part of the power generation mix for the grid in the coming years, and followed by sort of similar developments in the solar space. So what that means is the grid will have to deal with the fact that the power from both of those sources is only available when the wind is blowing or the sun is shining. So there is a need for projects like NZT Power, which can provide power on a dispatchable basis into the grid when those renewable sources aren't available, to effectively cover the demand, and that's why sort of gas-powered power stations with carbon capture are going to be an important part of the power generation mix in the coming years. A little bit of a look into Teesside specifically. So I believe the Humber cluster has given an update in recent months to this group. So I'm just going to focus a little bit today on Teesside specifically, and what we're doing in Teesside. So as Mark explained, we have the Teesworks site located up north, and that is where we are going to place the power station, and also the compression facilities boosting the CO2 into dense phase as it goes into the export pipeline offshore. The rest of the CO2 network onshore on Teesside will operate in gas phase. So you can see some sort of conceptual layouts for the onshore pipeline network around Teesside. I was quite fortunate last year during the midst of even some of the initial lockdowns. We received approval to sort of conduct some site visits to the location, given the criticality of maintaining progress on the project. So I spent quite a lot of time sort of walking some of these established industrial pipeline routes and also at the Teesworks site. And you know, the sort of conceptual map here doesn't really do justice to why Teesside is such a compelling location for a project like this. You have an incredible density of industries and a really sort of well-established network of industrial pipelines, industrial pipeline corridors, which we will look to reutilize as much as we can. And sort of with that, you know, industrial heritage and experience comes an understanding of what it takes, you know, from a consenting and development perspective to get these projects off the line. So, you know, when we've been talking to stakeholders and landowners, we have, you know, we've been dealing with people who understand what it takes to develop industrial projects like this, which is a really significant advantage, you know, of Teesside as a location to work and do business in for projects of this type. We have been working to progress a development consent order, which covers the consenting for all of the onshore network. So effectively, it's the planning permission for building the CO2 pipeline network, the gas pipeline required to come into the power station, and also the facilities at the Teesworks site. And you know, there'll be some sort of public announcements about that in the coming weeks. On this map, we have a number of potential emitters who we will be connecting to. So there are, you know, lots of existing industries with mature plans for developing capture projects as the business models evolve. And really what we will be doing is building out a network of CO2 pipelines to the fence lines of these industries, and taking the CO2 into this network and into the offshore pipeline. So moving on to, you know, what are the sort of fundamental or high-level socioeconomic benefits that we believe the cluster will deliver and offer to both the locations and also more broadly to the wider UK economy. So as I mentioned earlier, we have, you know, we believe NEP represents the opportunity to capture up to 50% of the UK's industrial cluster emissions, and also the associated protection of up to 60,000 jobs across the two locations. And you know, combined, that is basically the single biggest opportunity to decarbonize industry in the UK, and also enable the development of low carbon hydrogen projects on both Humber and Teesside. So looking at the pipeline of potential hydrogen projects, so Mark earlier mentioned the BP-led H2 Teesside development. We've also got developments, hydrogen projects being developed on the Humber. Those we believe can deliver up to 70% of the UK's 5 gigawatt hydrogen production target for 2030. So again, really compelling locations from that perspective. And sort of linking back to the sort of job creation and job safeguarding piece, I think we all understand the case of CCUS and why that's fundamentally important for hard to abate industrial sectors. So the existence of this system will enable the viability of those businesses into the long term and protect, you know, thousands of existing jobs in those sectors. It will also create many thousands of high quality new jobs, you know, as we upskill people to manufacture, construct and operate novel CCUS facilities. And it will also bring in new industry. You know, we are speaking to, or we hear from lots of potential developers who are attracted to both of these locations, who are attracted to Teesside because of this infrastructure that they believe is going to be accessible to them to help them decarbonize their businesses, and the sort of, you know, the sort of cyclical synergies and benefits that creates when you have the skills and the you know, local expertise available to develop projects of this type, and ultimately, you know, supporting the development of an export market for the UK as this industry matures, And as we begin to export some of the skills that were used or that will have been developed in getting this project up and running. So what are the sort of steps in front of us over the next few years to make this a reality? So we have seen that BEIS have announced a CCUS cluster sequencing process, which will run over the next couple of months. And they will be using that to determine or sequence the first 2 clusters, which will receive sort of government support and negotiation of business models to come on stream by the mid-2020s, the so-called Track 1 clusters. So NEP, as the sort of developer of the East Coast cluster, is working to submit a cluster plan by the 9th of July deadline to BEIS, consolidating all of the work we've done across both locations and demonstrating why this is a credible, deliverable, and ultimately highly beneficial location for the government to select as part of Track 1. So right now we are really very, very busy in the midst of preparing that cluster plan. We're working very closely with the range of emitters who we believe will be part of that sort of submission across both locations as we gear up for the 9th of July deadline. We expect that after that, by August, BEIS will announce a shortlist of clusters, and then by the end of October, we'll have made an announcement of the outcome of what they call phase 1. So that will have selected or shortlisted the 2 clusters, which will be part of the Track 1 process to come on stream by the mid-2020s. In parallel, from sort of August onwards, BEIS will be inviting emitter projects to make their submissions as well by a deadline of the 1st of November. And by the end of November, we expect BEIS will announce the capture projects, which will connect into each of these clusters and sort of enter into negotiations with BEIS. And we expect, from that point onwards, we would enter into negotiations with BEIS to develop heads of terms and mature the business models for the transportation storage regulatory investment model. And also the emitters will enter into negotiations for the industrial carbon capture business models, which the first of which BEIS have outlined that they are minded to award directly by direct negotiations for the sort of initial projects that will be getting off the ground by the mid-2020s. And then there will be subsequent sort of allocation rounds, not too dissimilar to the sort of CFD auction rounds that have happened for offshore wind projects, to develop business models for subsequent sort of phase 2 projects. So from the perspective of Net Zero Teesside and NEP, we are really gearing up to take a decision to enter the FEED stage for our project. We've conducted quite extensive pre-FEED activity over the last year or so, which we've taken through a sort of rigorous partner review in recent months. And we're really kind of ready to take this project into the next stage and get ready to come on stream by sort of late 2026. So I will close there with my sort of last slide around what we believe is the key message for NEP and why we believe it should be selected by the government as one of the Track 1 clusters. It will be in our belief a really powerful signal of the UK's global leadership in the sort of green in the sort of emerging global low carbon and hydrogen market. And really that would be announced, at a key moment in the run up to COP 26. So yeah, thanks for your time, everyone. Thanks for listening. I'm more than happy to take questions. Ben, I guess I'll hand back to you to facilitate and chair the Q&A session.
Well, thank you both. That was really interesting. Could be really exciting times coming up. That's really nice. So we've got the questions starting to come through already. So if you didn't see Karis's message, if you have a question, Please pop it in the chat or raise your hand, and then I'll ask you to read out your question yourself so we can get a bit of interaction. But can you also state your name and where you work as well? So should we start with this first question here? So, Hari, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's working, yeah.
Yeah, good. I am Hari from Indonesia. Hopefully you are all fine condition. Thank you. And I just have one question regarding CCS application that in Indonesia, almost all people is not sure and not really about the CCS will be working, and right now is to do the regulation. So the question is how good CCS will be working when the efficiency, how much it is, 50%, 60%, and what the successful factor. Thank you.
Okay, so just briefly to cover a couple of key elements I thought I heard in that question. So in terms of capture efficiency, that will really depend on the type of process and the type of capture project that is being developed. So we've got various efficiencies which will be process specific. Obviously, as the projects that are sort of greenfield, developing both their power or hydrogen facilities and capture facilities from scratch will be targeting very, very high capture rates, upwards of 80–90%. And then I think that the sort of second question in that was, emissions will continue to increase depending on which scenario you look at. So I think that really is a compelling case for why CCUS is really important. The IEA has recently published its sort of net zero to 2050 sort of roadmap, and it's yet another publication and model which has underpinned that the journey to net zero isn't really possible without CCUS in the mix. The extent of CCUS in the mix, I think there are various opinions and various models about, but everyone agrees that CCUS will be required in some form or another to get us to that net zero target. If we move on to next question, I think I can just pick it up here, Max, if you want to come off mute.
Hi Bilal, thanks for your commentary. My name is Max Richards. I work for a company called OPC, based in London. I did my master project on CCS a couple of years ago, and now projects with that with a lot of our clients. One of the issues I found is translating, in their infinite wisdom, BEIS's regulatory advice and commentary, especially on transport storage models. It's very hard to disseminate information. I find it very challenging to actually understand what the message they're trying to get across, and there's a lot of gaps in the regulation and support that BEIS has provided. So I was just hoping, you mentioned in your presentation about the business model and the transport storage. I understand the fundamentals, but I was hoping you might be able to add just a little bit more granularity to the comments you made, and just provide a little bit more in detailed analysis, if that's possible. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks, Max. I can give a quick overview. I think a deep dive into the business model itself would probably take us over an hour.
We could do a whole presentation.
Yeah. Just briefly.
I wish you would.
Yeah, just briefly. Effectively, it is for the TNS. The TRI model is a regulated asset-based system. So how that's going to work is we will have an economic regulator similar to Ofgem governing the TNS company and awarding the sort of economic license to each TNS company. And the regulator will control, well, based in the first instance, but ultimately the regulator will determine the allowed revenue that the TNS company is permitted to make depending on a range of factors, ultimately, the capex that's invested into the system. And the regulator will also stipulate other associated conditions and also the price control period that the revenue mechanisms will apply for, and also how the sort of principles of other emitters connecting into the system will work. So, I mean, that's a very high level overview. I mean, I could really go into lots and lots of detail. I think you're quite right, Max, that BEIS have published, there's still a long way to go between what BEIS have published right now and a model which is ultimately investable from a sort of perspective of partners like BP and others being able to take an FID decision and also get project finance. So completely agree. There's a long way to go yet with BEIS on this.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that was the one thing. The problem I'm having is how can I talk to some of my clients about making a final investment decision, because that's what we want to do, but we can't because there's just too much ambiguity. So I'll just have to wait for that carbon price to get even higher. And yeah, you guys at BP can keep buying and push the price up. But yeah, cheers for your input. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Max.
So we've got Ben next. Do you want to ask your question now?
Hi, yeah, so Ben Willis from RWE here, and I think it sort of follows on nicely from that description of business models. Given you've got the TNS project supported by the TRI and the Net Zero Teesside power project, which will be supported by the dispatchable power agreement, are you concerned about the regulatory or licensing conflict of interest potential that Ofgem might take with regards to owning both a capture project and the network that feeds both CO2 and, more importantly, revenues into the transmission network at all?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So I think as it stands, we without those business models and regulations in place, there's a compelling case for why an integrated project such as the one we have with NZT offers a lot of benefits from an engineering perspective and just from the perspective of kind of the synergies that come with using engineering contractors and engineering teams that are sort of co-located and working on this on both aspects together. But I think the point you make is an important one. Commercially, at some stage, the projects will have to start to be governed separately, and that we expect that the sort of negotiations of the DPA for the power station and the negotiation of the TRI for the TNS system will happen separately, and those will be separate conversations and separate negotiations with BEIS and ultimately the regulator. So we believe that it can be done in a way that sort of keeps any sort of regulatory concerns sort of manageable from that perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think Christine's next with a question about jobs.
Yes, thank you. Apologies for my voice, quite rough because of a cold. Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. It's about the figure of 60,000 jobs that you presented on protecting those jobs, which I think is great, really, to maintain those high quality jobs, and it's very good for the region as well. But do you have any idea on actual new jobs or the net balance on jobs, or if you have had any calculations on that? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. So we have done lots of work in looking at new jobs. We are sort of consolidating that work at the moment between both clusters. Up to now, we've sort of looked at Teesside and Humber separately as two separate clusters in terms of new jobs. Where we're just literally in the process of consolidating the work to figure out what the net numbers should look like with NEP and the East Coast cluster as a combined value proposition. So watch this space. You will see some sort of publications on this imminently. The existing numbers, we're not going to be a million miles off from the existing numbers we have published. So you can find those on the Net Zero Teesside and the Zero Carbon Humber websites, and Drax have also done some really good work in this space on new jobs that will be created from this.
Thank you.
I think, Mark, yeah, I think I support the conclusions, obviously, of the project. The Combined Authority has done some work on this going back a few years, and there was a study done of CCS applied to the whole of the East Coast, which gave numbers of the same order as the ones that have been come up with by the project. And I think, there will be numbers, almost equivalent numbers of new jobs we hope created. And I think the sort of interest we're seeing in the Teesworks site is partly driven by the anticipation of CO2 coming there. I mean, there's a new investment on processing rare earth minerals has been announced recently on Teesside, which we think is probably attached to this. So these jobs are going to happen once we get this project and the business models it needs in position.
Okay, thank you. I think John's got a question next about things that might go wrong.
Not about things that go wrong, but timing. You said that you'd have the transport ready by the end of 2026. That was the plan. When do you need the CO2? You need it before that for commissioning, or is it also the end of 2026?
Thanks, John. So it would be, ideally around the same time. We can commission parts of the system without CO2 volumes, but obviously the full commissioning all the way through to injecting into Endurance will require volumes, CO2 volumes coming in. So the timing would be similar, and this is what we expect the BEIS cluster sequencing process to really provide some clarity on. Up till, although the cluster sequencing process has created quite a lot of work, it has provided clarity on the timing question from the perspective of how will the clusters themselves be get from now to FID from a business models perspective, but also which emitter projects will be supported within that track one process.
You don't know the emitter projects yet, do you? I mean, the emitter projects are decided in a second phase, aren't they, or second stage?
They are indeed, but they are required to have signed up to a cluster in the phase one process. So our cluster plan will not just be a plan that talks about the TNS system. It will talk about all of the emitters who have expressed an interest in becoming a primary emitter. And primary emitters have been defined by BEIS as quite clearly as being those who have a credible project to come on stream by 2030, and also at a very minimum an MOU in place with a cluster, with a TNS company. So there is by the time we submit our cluster plan, we will know that list of primary emitters.
You just don't know which ones will get funded. That's all.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Thanks.
Good. So should we have Tobias's question next about the clusters?
Maybe just shows my ignorance of this. I was aware of the Northern Endurance Partnership, but interested to hear that you're submitting as one cluster. Is that definitely an approach which BEIS is on board with, or might there need to be a separation back into Teesside and Humber? It seems to be slightly stretching the definition of a cluster, maybe, but I can see the logic of it also.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. No. Thanks, Tobias. Good question. So, BEIS are aware of the East Coast cluster proposition that we're putting in, and there are significant benefits from co-developing both locations. Not least that the storage, prime storage location is close to both locations. Ultimately, BEIS reserve the right to sequence any cluster and any emitter projects within a cluster as they deem fit, based on the scoring criteria that they've set out, and also sort of affordability and other criteria that they will have. So it will ultimately be a BEIS decision, but we are very much committed to making a single sort of East Coast cluster submission, and BEIS are aware of that. That will be coming in as a single East Coast cluster submission.
Marvelous. I think in the original requests for in the competition, there certainly seem to be marks awarded for the idea of you could link between clusters, and what we've done here is directly link the clusters together. So in a sense, it conforms to what BEIS were looking for, which was added value from bringing clusters online together.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it seems like an unbeatable proposition as it stands. I just thought they might count it as 2 in the first track.
As Bilal has said, we don't know. That's for their decision, but we think it's an unbeatable combo. Why wouldn't you? Kind of.
Thanks very much.
Right, so we have to finish promptly for 3 today, but we've still got a bit of time. So we've got a technical question from May. If you'd like to introduce yourself and ask your question, please.
Great. Hi, everyone. It's Maya Bowie from Imperial College. So my question's kind of around sort of the dispatchability of the CCGT CCS plant that you mentioned, Bilal. And I guess the question is around how flexible this plant needs to be. And in the context of Teesside, what type of flexible operating regimes do you anticipate? So things like load following, do you expect it to need to start up and shut down? And that sort of thing. So if possible, if you're able to comment on this, that would be great.
Thanks, Meg. Great question. So I'm personally not that close to the development of the power station itself. I'm more focused on the NEP and its transportation and storage system. But sort of at a high level, we expect there to be a need for some initial baseload operation, particularly to get the plant commissioned and up and running in a stable manner. Beyond that, we expect that there will be startup and shutdown cycles. So that's sort of the basis we're looking at designing the plant around. It is, as you'll be aware, quite difficult to predict the timing of those startup and shutdown cycles. But we have done sort of quite extensive modeling to look at what the number of those potential cycles might be over the sort of duration of the dispatchable power agreement, and consequently the factors we need to consider in the design and engineering of the system.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so we're running out of time, but maybe we've got time for me just to ask one question. So talked a bit about the business model and taking CO2 from the Humber and from Teesside. Did you consider in that taking CO2 from outside the region or from another country as well?
Yeah, I think Mark will probably have some thoughts on this as well, but we are very much looking at opportunities for CO2 shipping. So for all of the reasons that Mark spoke about, with the sort of quayside facilities available, on Teesside, there is the opportunity to look at CO2 shipping. Northern Lights in Norway have started to do some great work in this space. So yes, we are very much looking at CO2 shipping and bringing CO2 into the system.
Yeah, we certainly see that there's an opportunity here for the UK to lead on transporting CO2 and allowing regions which otherwise would struggle to capture their emissions. I mean, the other reason for looking at shipping is clearly to make sure that there are is a supportive network, if you like, of carbon capture and storage projects across Northern Europe. If for some reason ours doesn't work, what do we do with the CO2? It applies to us as to others. So a shipping angle is important if we're actually going to achieve our goal of getting to net zero, and doing that reliably, and not ending up with emissions happening just because something is shut down for a while. But certainly the size of the stores and aquifers on the east coast of the UK are a unique geology, and one that we could benefit from in terms of both the climate and in terms of a business opportunity for the UK. Right.
So we've got time for one last quick question from Francois. So Francois, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Hello, and thanks for nice presentations. I have a, I guess, pretty simple question, but maybe tough to answer. How do you estimate the cost will be for connecting to the TNS? Maybe you've said it during the presentation, but I'm not sure I got it.
Thanks, Francois. A great question. We have numbers which we probably can't share publicly at this stage, but you know the TNS fee will come down as the system expands. And I mean, I guess what I can say is, you're looking at where the EU ETS carbon price is headed and where the UK carbon trading system launched at, I think upwards of £50 per tonne for those who follow those numbers. It won't be too long, you know, after this system is up and running before we believe that you know, this system can start to operate on a subsidy-free basis. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so sorry, I think we're running out of time, but I'd like to say thanks to everyone for coming, and I'd like to say a big thanks to Mark and to Bilal for speaking, and I'll keep my fingers crossed for you.
Thanks, guys. Really, really good, and thanks for the questions.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity of talking a bit about what's happening in the Tees Valley and more widely the Humber as well. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you both, and thank you, Ben, for sharing for us today as well. Thank you, and yeah, hopefully see some of you next week. So next week we'll be hearing from the Northwest cluster, so the other side of the country, and yeah, we look forward to seeing as many of you as possible at the same time, 2 o'clock on Thursday. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bilal. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ben, and have a great day.
Bye for now.